Viewing pornography is consistently one of the most popular uses of the internet.
Are you here to take care of my problem?
Yeah, I'm the recur man.
The majority of people, and the vast majority of men, use pornography by most estimates.
I think there's something big hot in the garbage disposal.
Oh, really?
And most people even do it regularly.
I should take a look.
However, pornography use is also widely considered to be bad for you.
When your brain is holding you hostage.
Pornography addiction. I think it's harming a lot of men.
The effects can be devastating.
It has been implicated in erectile dysfunction, relationship problems, addiction, and a wide variety of other problems related to desensitization.
Past kinky, there's violent.
They crave pixels instead of people.
Destroying your relationship.
So, how bad exactly is pornography for you?
Put the lotion
down.
Let's have an objective look at the scientific evidence without going into the morality. I will focus on men because most users of pornography are male, and the research also shows that most problems arise in men. If anything, the associations in women tend to be positive or neutral. But most of the findings I will discuss apply to both, especially this section on the effects of pornography use on relationships. So, let's dig into it. First, let's talk about desensitization. Desensitization is at the root of many problems caused by pornography, according to many theories at least. The idea is that when you consume pornography, you are exposed to hyper-normal stimuli. Excessively voluptuous women or men doing things that are excessively sexual and kinky in a variety of ways that you would never see in person. And it's very easy to escalate your pornography use into whatever level of depravity you are comfortable with. So how bad is this? Well, if we look at the scientific research, there are lots of negative correlations with pornography use. However, correlation does not imply causality. Many of these negative correlations could be bidirectional or the other way around. For example, people that are extremely anxious and have difficulty with social interaction, they might use more pornography because that is easier for them and they have difficulty getting a partner. So you will get a relationship between all sorts of negative social problems and pornography use. Similarly, people with erectile dysfunction, for example, might use pornography because they are very uncomfortable trying to have sex when they can't get it up. So again, you might see a correlation, whereas there is no causal role of pornography actually causing these problems. Indeed, according to a critical scientific review, while there are lots of associations and case reports implicating pornography use with all sorts of negative things, they concluded there is little, if no evidence, that pornography use may induce delayed ejaculation and erectile dysfunction. So there's no causal evidence of desensitization induced by pornography. However, there's also not a whole lot of actual experimentally controlled research or well-conducted longitudinal trials with prospective cohorts. So, in part, this is an absence of evidence, but at least we can say that there is no strong evidence that pornography causes all of these problems of desensitization. There is another area of research that we can look into, which may be analogous to the effect of desensitization with pornography use. That's video games. When video games started becoming popular, there was a widespread concern that video games caused aggression. Many video games are quite aggressive in nature, and the idea was that if you see this aggression, then you're going to be, again, desensitized to it, and it becomes normalized, and you're going to implement more of these things out in the real world. And again, there were lots of associations with people playing video games and all sorts of negative social effects. But again, this may be caused by just some people being more awkward, or people that don't like society as a whole retreating into video games, or people that are already very aggressive liking aggressive video games. So again, this was a situation where we have a lot of associative research suggesting that there are negative effects of video games. And there were also some short-term effects of video games in children, for example, where if you have children play an aggressive video game, then you see that afterwards in play, they can act out some of these things and they may temporarily act more aggressively, at least in play, but that might just be explained by arousal. If we look at critical reviews of the scientific evidence of how this supposed aggression translates into real-life aggressive behaviors, most of the effects are neutral. There is basically no strong evidence that playing aggressive video games makes people more aggressive in the real world, because we know it's a game. So similarly, probably, you would expect that people know that pornography is not real. And I don't expect that there are a lot of people who will, for example, when their partner offers sexual intimacy, they're like, oh, I think I'll just rather watch some porn. It's not the same thing. We are well aware that pornography is not real. When we are playing a video game, we are well aware that we are playing a video game. It's not like the military is widespread using gamers because they can go out and not have PTSD. It's like, No, don't worry about me, bro. I'm not gonna get PTSD in Afghanistan or Vietnam or whatever because I played Call of Duty. It doesn't work that way. Playing Counter-Strike does not desensitize you to the horrors of war. It's completely different, and we are well aware that one is a game and the other is a life-threatening situation in which your friends are dying and you might be dying. So a kind of pop psychology view of desensitization occurring so easily and transferring to other scenarios, I think it doesn't pan out that well. It reminds me a bit of when parents try to educate their children and they think that you can educate children by telling them certain things and doing other things, whereas in reality, the children understands that there's a difference between what you tell them and what you do, and setting the right example works a whole lot better than telling them something and then yourself actually doing the thing that you tell them not to do. Even children are very much aware of this distinction, so I think for adults, the concern of desensitization is something to be met with skepticism. Strongly related to the concern of desensitization is the concern of addiction. Classical pharmacological addiction syndrome is characterized by dopaminergic sensitization and serotonergic desensitization. This means that using a drug in particular, because most of the addiction research originally comes from drugs like cocaine or heroin, what happens in your brain is that the serotonergic system, which is kind of the liking system, desensitizes. So you need progressively higher doses of the drug to experience a similar high, to experience a similar level of well-being. This is true desensitization. At the same time, there is dopaminergic sensitization, which makes you want the drug more, and it causes seeking and compulsion to use the drug. When you stop using the drug, there is withdrawal. Those are three strong aspects that characterize true classical addiction. With pornography, food, gambling, the use of the word addiction has become very watered down, and we call a lot of things addictive that basically just have in common that they are short-term, pleasurable things that have long-term negative repercussions. But most of human folly in general is things that we do that have short-term positive effects but long-term negative effects. So if we use that as the definition of addiction, then pretty much everything is addictive that's bad for you. Now, with the traditional definition, it's very clear that pornography use does not fit the definition of addiction. There is no withdrawal after you stop using it. Desensitization is very iffy and not really supported by the current evidence. And there's also no dopaminergic desensitization where you get this massive compulsion to keep seeking out pornography, especially when alternatives are available. Indeed, in the DSM-5, which is basically the Bible of psychologists, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, there is no diagnosis that is officially recognized for pornography addiction. They did review certain types of disorders, which they called hypersexuality-related behavioral disorders, and pornography use was a subset of that. But they rejected it because there is insufficient peer-reviewed evidence to establish the diagnostic criteria and course descriptions needed to identify these behaviors as mental disorders. So basically, porn addiction was officially rejected as a thing. Now, it's certainly the case that many people have problematic usage of porn, and that might be considered even a compulsion. But you can get compulsions for a lot of things that are not necessarily addictive. Just because you do something a lot and it's bad for you does not constitute an addiction. And the thing you have the compulsion for might not be the cause. Usually in these cases, the cause is unhappiness, an unfulfilled life, causing you to seek something else to give you pleasure. Our brains are wired to seek gratification and pleasure. If we don't get that from our immediate environment or our life in general, we seek out things that are pleasurable. The happier our life is, the less we feel the need to seek out these things that are problematic or maybe have long-term negative effects, and we can indulge in other things that give us pleasure in life, which are not necessarily harmful for us. This is well supported by research on original cocaine addiction in rats. When you put a rat in a cage, rats will very quickly become addicted to cocaine. You give them cocaine, you give them food. Some rats will literally overdose on the cocaine rather than eating the food. They will literally starve themselves in favor of cocaine over food. Now, when you replicate these experiments with rats in nice environments, and a famous line of experiments in this area is widely referred to as a rat park, essentially made with lots of other rats and female rats and nice environments and a wheel they can run in and all that stuff. And in these environments, when you put rats in that cage, which is more like a theme park, a nice environment, and then you give them cocaine, they will still use cocaine, and there are still some indications of addictions because, well, cocaine is really addictive, but the usage is far less. Some rats don't become addicted at all. The negative effects, the social effects, the depression and the like that it causes are also far less. There's far less addiction, there's also less withdrawal afterwards, and it's much easier to reverse any symptoms of withdrawal. Even when a rat is already addicted to cocaine, and you put them in rat park, they will often no longer be addicted to cocaine. They will naturally detox themselves and just have a happy life. So this line of experiments is foundational to our understanding of what addiction is and shows that many times addiction to something has very little to do with that something and has a lot more to do with your life and your need to seek out pleasure. When we don't get pleasure from our life, we seek out something else that does give us that pleasure, even if we know it's very bad for us. So in this sense, addiction or pornography use is more a symptom than that pornography is the cause of these problems. A similar thing occurred in humans in the Vietnam War, and we also see it in hospitals with morphine use. People that use morphine in hospitals typically don't develop a heroin addiction, even though morphine and heroin are almost the same. In the Vietnam War, lots of soldiers used heroin overseas. Heroin was easily available and, well, war kind of sucks, so it's a ripe environment for heroin addiction. There was in fact such a big concern of soldiers coming back from the war, coming back home, that there were lots of programs in place to make sure that this heroin addiction would not become like a massive societal problem, and we suddenly get this influx of veterans into the United States, which were all addicted to heroin and cause a mass pandemic of heroin usage. That did not occur at all. It turns out that only a very small percentage of people that were addicted still developed heroin addiction. The most estimates are like 1%, even though around 10% still used it. So even though people came back, they had access to heroin, they used it again, and still the vast majority of them did not develop heroin addiction. And heroin is one of the most addictive drugs that there are. Why is that? Well, it's because they came from an environment that really sucked. War. You want your body seeking out pleasure, you're in war, well, heroin will do the trick. But when you get home, you're back with your wife, you're in a nice family, you have a nice surrounding, you don't risk getting shot every day. Suddenly, heroin addiction is not such an appealing life choice anymore. Similarly, we see that heroin addiction is ripe in areas with very low quality of life. Now, of course, this is probably a bidirectional relationship. People that generally don't take care of themselves very well and develop heroin addiction, they are not going to make for the nicest neighborhood. But also, if you're in a neighborhood like that, you're much more likely to develop an addiction because life sucks. And it's much harder to make things better in your life in that scenario. So it's much more tempting to succumb to something like a heroin addiction or a cocaine addiction. So again, we see that correlation is not causation. So most research does not support that pornography use is inherently addictive. Rather, it may be a symptom of something else being wrong in your life if you develop compulsive pornography usage. If we look at the effects of pornography in people that are in relationships, we actually have some randomized controlled trials that exposed couples to pornography and saw what happened to their relationships. In these studies, the effects of pornography are actually positive. Generally, couples report having more sex when they are experimentally induced to pornography, and there are no negative effects on relationship satisfaction, sexual preferences, or ratings of their partner's appearance or sexual competence. But these findings do not demonstrate any negative effects of desensitization or weird unnatural expectations. Again, it seems that people recognize that pornography is not real and that it even can have positive effects on someone's relationship. However, again, if we look at correlations, we see that in men specifically, high pornography usage can be a symptom that something is wrong. However, when we see that both people in the relationship use pornography, the sexual dysfunction scores are actually lower than when neither does it. So again, it does not seem that porn itself is the issue, but it might be a problem when one person is very unfulfilled in a relationship and therefore ends up using a lot of pornography because they're not getting what they want from the relationship. So again, big difference between the associations of porn use and the actual causal effects. Similarly, we see that it's a red flag when people are relatively highly aroused by pornography in a relationship. That's an indication that probably you're not as sexually fulfilled as you would like to be in your relationship. Indeed, that is a negative predictor of sexual satisfaction in the relationship, and it predicts breakups. But again, this is not necessarily a causal effect of the pornography, but it might be a symptom. Further support for the idea that pornography use is more of a negative symptom than a cause of relationship problems is that the negative associations between pornography use and relationship outcomes don't occur in non-monogamous relationships. So when people are not constrained by who they can have sex with, then apparently it's completely fine if people use a lot of pornography. Similarly, we see that in relationships where there is high acceptance of pornography, there are also no negative effects. So the negative effects of pornography are specifically in relationships where it is a taboo, and it can be a negative symptom and expression of unfulfillment in the relationship. In research, if we asked people if pornography use is negatively affecting their relationships, we see that in stable relationships, most people say that pornography is not negatively affecting their relationships, and their answers to these questions are indeed objectively unrelated to relationship outcomes, emotional intimacy, and relationship satisfaction. Pornography usage in couples is also not associated with infidelity. There's also concern that viewing porn increases sexual violence, just like with video games. However, most natural experiments have not supported this. Analyses of what happened to Denmark, the United States, and Japan, for example, as pornography usage grew, have not supported that there was an increase in sexual violence or any type of sexual crime. When pornography usage was legalized in Denmark, there was no effect on sexual crimes. In the late 60s in Japan, when the ban on sexually explicit materials was lifted, there was actually a decrease in the number of sexual crimes, particularly those related to children. And in the United States, when pornography usage became widespread and grew extremely rapidly in popularity, there was no corresponding increase in sexual crimes either. In fact, one study went as far as to say, everywhere it was scientifically investigated that as pornography has increased in availability, sex crimes have either decreased or not increased. So the concern that viewing violence in video games or pornography causes violence out in the real world is not supported by scientific evidence. In conclusion, research does not support that porn is simply inherently bad. It depends highly on the context in which it is viewed and what that means. For example, pornography usage can certainly be a red flag if it, for example, means that you are unhappy with your relationship, you're not getting what you want out of your sex life, and therefore you're resorting to pornography without telling your partner. That is not a good sign. However, if you watch porn when your partner is out of the country or when your partner is not available, that may not inherently be negative for the relationship. In fact, research supports that when you view porn together, that might even be positive for the relationship. That said, while research does not find compelling evidence for any negative social or cognitive effects of pornography usage per se, that does not mean that pornography usage is a great usage of your time. Viewing pornography is a pure consumption activity, if you will, that doesn't invest in the future. It's not productive behavior. This also goes for video games. I used to play a lot of video games myself, and I stopped doing that because while I liked playing video games, I never really felt fulfilled afterwards, and it wasn't positively affecting my life in any other way. So you're just spending time to do something that is nice, but also not really fulfilling and does not give you anything for the rest of your life. So in that sense, I think it's a rather unproductive investment of your time. Even worse, afterwards you often lose your mojo and you might be less productive afterwards as well. However, in some circumstances, it can also be good to simply relax.
You gotta stay relaxed. Yeah. You jerk off? Do I jerk off? Yeah. Yeah, I jerk off, yeah.
How many times a week?
Like, three, four times, maybe.
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers.
If you like this type of evidence-based psychological content, I'd be honored if you would like and subscribe.